Great news, you've signed up for your first 70.3, or perhaps you're a seasoned intermediate 70.3 triathlete. Now you've got 300 tabs open on your browser and you're not sure which formula to follow or how to start, but you're not ready necessarily to dive down into the coaching route. Today's video, I'm going to build you the whole framework you need to get you through your first 70.3. Even if you're a sub 5 hour finisher, you'll learn something, hopefully. Thanks for tuning in. I'll start with a little quick story of myself. We're going back to 2003, 2004, over 20 years ago, my first half Ironman, I'll never forget. I was in Australia, in Busselton. There's that long pier that you swim out to. I did my first half Ironman there. There's a picture of me here racing in my GB duathlon suit. I don't think I'd ever done, certainly hadn't gone over Olympic distance. And I took that methodology and that thought process into half Ironman, but of course I was early 20s, had no idea the strength required for a 90-kilometer bike ride. So I'm going to dive into that. I then ran my way through the field to catch back up because of course I'd lost so much time out of the sea with the fast Australians on a road bike with clip-on tri-bars. It was fantastic in the sweltering Australian heat in the middle of peak summer. And I managed to run myself up. I can't remember. I think it was 5 hours. I can't remember. Call it 5:20. I have no idea. I was trying to dig out my medal. I don't have those that far back. But what I learned from that was to carry over into my next phase of training. I was not coached at that time. And now, subsequently 20 years later, of having been an endurance coach and helped hundreds of athletes go through 70.3s and tons of races myself over the last sort of 15 years, I wanted to share with you, it's not a cookie cutter, cut and paste plan that's going to work for everyone. Remember, you are the individual. So we're going to make sure that you get some really good value and hopefully some great takeaways to then take the next step to actually structure your 16 to 18 week journey. Bear in mind when this comes out, we're in the northern hemisphere midsummer, so this might be towards the end of the year, or if you're traveling and then into the new year of 2026. The most important thing, it's customizable to your situation as a framework, and then you can jig here and there, and actually Training Peaks is great to move sessions around once you've got a framework. So let's dive into it. Where to start? Well, we always know that the end goal in mind. Now, if you're a beginner, the first end goal should be to finish, complete. Ultimately, you want to do it as best as you can. Some people just want to tick the box, and that's fantastic. So you need to start with you, not the plan, if you know what I mean. So a plan's great off the shelf. Then we need to mold it to you. But that's where the breakdown comes, and that's where coach really is quite helpful. And if you are thinking after watching this video that you might need a first step but don't want to commit to full-blown coaching, click on the little link below. I've got a 20-week 70.3 plan with support that'll guide you through it. So the support being from a coach and interactively, or if you're ready to take the full-blown and actually get performance gains, click on the one-to-one coaching inquiry. We've got about 2 spots left as this is going out in mid-July. Okay, you've got to start with you and how that fits into your life. Are you a 23-year-old that recovers really quickly all the time in the hands, or on your hands, or you got 2, potentially 3 children, which most of my clients have average of 2 kids, and that's when this becomes a real important thing, is how it fits into your life, and you've obviously got some work and commitments there. You don't recover as well as you did when you were 23, 25, and you need to figure out what your training history is like. Now, this is really important, your training age. This is often looked over, certainly when you start down a journey of sport in triathlon world. You've got a background of some sort of sport, but training age, we're talking years. Have you been running? Have you been riding a bike? Have you been developing your aerobic foundation for years, or are you just coming out from a soccer, football background, short, sharp bursts, perhaps some racket sports? Then you don't have high training age. It's really important to note. Even if you came from a swimming background, you don't have that loading on the muscles, tendons and ligaments, and you're pretty lax in your joints if you come from a swimming background. So those are things to consider, because when the running mileage starts to increase, you can pick up problems, and unfortunately it normally comes quite late down the process, 8, 12 weeks into the process, and by then you lose consistency. Okay, customizable, start with the end in mind, so you work backwards. Plan needs to fit you and your life, and you need to consider your history and your training age. Okay, let's still got your attention. Another consideration. Now, I did do a video on the female triathlete, if you can check it out over here. That's a little bit around hormones, strength training, fasted training, etc. And there's certain elements. But your recovery is completely different. Back to that fasted training comment, we wouldn't advocate any fasted training for females. Different builds, different strengths. Male has more muscle mass, of course. Women just can go longer, further, big time, long in terms of endurance. That's why they're so great at ultra running. They might lack the super speed in shorter efforts. It depends on the individual. But male versus female, recovery times is important. And then this is linked with the above comment here, which I mentioned. Now, are you starting this process with injuries? Okay. Either it's a shoulder back niggle, which is going to prevent the swimming, or it's traditionally 80% of the time it's running. And that's actually how you've sometimes fallen into this zone. Is I've been on a marathon plan for a long time, training for running races. Now you've got excited, a friend signed up for 70.3, but actually you're running a bit too much, 50, 60, 80 Ks a week, and you're finding you just can't recover from it and adapt. So you realize that actually only maybe need to run 20, 30 Ks a week to get through a 70.3. And I think that's a really important point here. So you can see how your starting point is the most. Sit down and write this down. This is how you kind of going to go, right, okay, let's be realistic. What have I got available in my resources? What are my resources? So time, availability. What's my diet like? Does that need cleaning up? Because that's your priority, sleep and eating, to support the training. The training is actually, yes, it's hard. It can be tricky, certainly in the third phase when we go through that. And the most important thing is you will start to lose weight. You're just building your zone 2. You're going to burn lots of body fat. You're going to get tired, and that leads to hands up, grumpiness, mood change. Your partner's like, gosh, you're so obsessed with training. What about us? What about us? And then you get resentful because they're not supporting you. Totally been there. I'm sure you're laughing at this, sniggering away, because we do get quite obsessed. Or maybe you just brand new, which is why you've fallen on this. So I'm just giving you a little bit of experience and a bit of history of myself in terms of how that's perhaps endured on my side. But then you live and learn. Okay. So next step will be kind of your block 1, your phase 1. So great stuff. I'm with you all the way. Let's talk about block 1. Okay, shall we? Now this could be different duration because we're working backwards from your event, but let's say you've got 6 weeks of this phase, call it an 18-week plan, 18-week build. Again, you just shorten the foundation phase if need be. So this is key, okay? This is it's called so many different things. Foundation phase, it could be also called general conditioning, but it's the most important outcome is to build aerobic efficiency. The more time you spend in an aerobic block, the better you get at utilizing fat as fuel, developing mitochondria, which is your energy, and you hear this word efficient, so the body's ability to adjust to the training, to lay the foundation, so when you do the harder stuff down the line, you've got the durability. So key here, we're not chasing speed, and this is where people go wrong. Okay, so patience. I'm working with someone at the moment, and their heart rate, for example, we're just trying to get it down the run, and suddenly after about 6 weeks, 7 weeks, it's just dropped, and the pace has just dropped. But in the first 3 or 4 weeks, it was definitely like frustrating because we redesigned the zones. Okay, so we're not chasing speed, we are building from the ground up. Okay, it's very important because the longer you spend there, the better your durability, the better you're able to absorb work. You're only as good as the adaptation of your training, believe it or not. So you break your muscle down, you break your energy pathways, you then rebuild back up, and that's when you get fitter. Okay, so your groundwork. And foundation, we in reinforcement, really good movement patterns. My pen's running out here. And sort out imbalances. Enjoying this so far, please subscribe as well. Thanks. It all just helps the channel grow. I know there's a few ads that pop in. There's some production costs. So for it to keep going and me providing you loads of value, please. It is fantastic. I really appreciate your support. 9 months into this process and it's been great. Feedback's fantastic. And my coaches are really happy with the type of athletes that are coming our way. So that's really good. All right. So you can start to see, okay. Let's just not go straight in buying a flashy TT bike, doing lots of miles. I'll dive into, at the summary, kind of roughly how many hours you should be focusing on as a beginner, perhaps intermediate, more experienced triathlete. So stick around for a little while, it won't be too long. Groundwork, absorb. You're doing the foundation phase to absorb the work later on. I've mentioned movement patterns. You might have some real difficult left and right imbalances going on. You'll be able to understand that if you just stand in front of a mirror, do some single leg balance work. I'll show you in a little video. Try and do some head rotations. Also just how your posture is. If you leant over to one side, you stand with a sway back or a real lordotic curve in your lower back. Females have a bigger curve, different anterior tilt of the pelvis. That's just anatomy. So you got to understand your movement patterns. Most of us are tight in the quads, hip flexor, front of the body, posterior chain's not very activated, which is what we need for running, hip flexion, hip extension. Biking's all in hip flexion and really quad dominant. So then when you start to run, you're all closed up. More on that later. And this is also really key to do strength work. Okay, all through the plan, but you probably want to try and implement it light twice a week. Okay, we build resilience, we're building durability, and it also creates discipline. So the first 6 weeks, first 3 weeks, you'll probably find it okay. And then from 3 weeks onwards, you'll get quite tired. Okay, build in a recovery week if you need to. I did a separate video on recovery early on a few months ago. You can check it out here. The idea is that you build that in. You don't need to do 1, 2, 3 week active recovery a fourth week. That's quite an old way of doing it. It's layering on week upon week, not pushing the needle too far too quickly, and you'll actually ebb and flow, track your HRV, heart rate variability. And if you're absorbing the training, you'll see your HRV go up steadily over weeks. Okay, if you start to see it trending down for a few weeks, you need to back off and let that come back up. More on that slightly later. Block 2, which gets a bit more exciting, we're going to build some volume and start to add some intensity. This is where things can go kind of a little bit, pear-shaped for some people, because why? They do too much too soon, too much frequency of intensity. So they do one day, second day they'll do another one, maybe you have a day off, try to do another one, and they end up racking up 4 intensity sessions a week. So what does intensity mean? Okay, we'll come on to that, like what is considered intensity. So you're gonna maintain your strength gains from block 1, which you're gonna move into now increasing your volume potentially maybe 1 to 2 hours a week. Okay, so that's why we mean just adding some sprinkling to the end of each sort of session. Okay, so we're going to start to add slightly longer sessions, okay, to increase the fatigue, which then builds durability, but that actually gets you quite used to how you're going to feel in a race. Okay, so it's all controlled. This is quite a key point. Controlled pace, intensity. Okay, now you can use heart rate monitors, power, pace, but if you don't understand all those metrics, then you shooting into the wind. So we might need to dive into a little bit more deeper with that. It's controlled, it's longer sessions, we slowly increase the volume because your body can handle it from the first block 1. Maybe think of this block as sort of controlled chaos. You know what I mean? It's overreaching, but specific, so functional, it's called functional overreaching. It's managed. It's not just going straight into it, okay? It's not about smashing yourself, no smashing, because one hero day doesn't make you better, which I've learned the hard way there as well. Years and years ago, over a decade ago, smash yourself, big weekend, big day, and Monday, Tuesday, absolute write-off, okay? So it's our first real exposure, and this is quite important, to race specific. Okay, what are the demands of your race? So we know we're going to be on the bike from 2.25, if you're very quick, to 3.5 hours on the bike, probably on a road position, or if you've got a TT bike, there we go. So we know it's a controlled tempo zone 3 type effort, not to get very specific of intensity factors for this specific video. So we need to move towards 15, 20, 30 minute type repetitions. We're getting some race exposure with controlled pace and intensity, okay? So that's really, really important. And then we're gonna build fatigue. I mentioned that early on, and that's what we want with an asterisk, because it's managed. Managed fatigue is different to just being tired all the time, okay? We also can learn what the body can handle, which then tells us we're teaching the body to train to handle more, So when we go into race prep and specificity phase, the last 5 to 6 weeks with the taper to get us to 18 weeks, you're going to be quite bulletproof. Okay, so you see how that, now there's not the nitty-gritty of exactly the sessions, I've done that in another video, but that leads us into block 3. Block 3 now, race specificity and race prep. Okay, even if you're not trying to race, to use that strong word, you need to condition your body as best as you can for the demands of the race. Okay, it's really important. I think a lot of us ignore that and, you know, turn up unprepared, but you feel like you've trained for 16 weeks and you still don't perform to your potential. So this is where we go from fit to prepared. It's one thing being fit, most triathletes are fit all year round, but really prepared is completely different. So we sharpen the axe, we get more specific with sessions, and we start to bring in open water more, okay, because there's 99% chance your race is open water. So it's really important that, you know, you don't try anything new on race day. You don't turn up, I've never swum open water, I've only been in a pool. Plenty of people do that. Plenty of people have actually done their first 70.3 without even dipped their toe in the water, let alone done a sprint triathlon. Okay, so for example, I've mentioned swim. So it's longer reps with the swim to just build fatigue. We're not trying to break records with the swim. I always say this, we want to try and get out the water as fresh as possible without burning much. Now the bike. Okay, longer power-based intervals. Now you don't have to do 90 kilometers in training. Even if you do sort of 70 to 85 Ks, that builds, you know, it's low impact. But the efforts are going to be 20 to 30 minute duration, where you ride to a pace that you feel you can sustain for the full 56 miles, 90 kilometers. Okay, so we have a specific range you might ride above your effort for 20 to 30 minutes, and then the next time you come back to it, you ride a little bit below your effort. So you play with those paces. There's different ways of slicing the cake, and we have that in our program, or it really becomes down to how conditioned you are by the time you get to your last block and how early you've started. Just back onto that, the swim, sorry to jump back. You want to probably build in, because your half Ironman is roughly around threshold pace. So when I say longer reps, you want to try and build from 100s and 200s, where people sort of, triathletes tend to stop at about 200 meters threshold work. That sort of burn, but not super hard. But when you have shorter reps, shorter rest, and accumulate 5, 10, 200s, 5, 400s, they generally can't manage holding threshold for that long because they haven't conditioned themselves. So I would bring in a lot of more threshold work in the swim, longer reps, so you build fatigue and resilience. All right, so with the run, we're going to start to bring in brick runs more regularly now. So a brick run is run off the bike. Okay, I would keep them short, because we want to just improve muscle memory, muscle firing patterns. So when you get, regularly, when you get to the race, you're so used to running on slightly heavier, tighter quads. You build leg speed on tired legs. It's really important. So you support the adaptation by doing what you're going to do. If you go and do 15 kilometers off the bike, you're just going to absolutely dig a hole. So we want to shift the training from generalized tempo runs, for example, hilly runs on fresh legs, to a little bit more, at least twice a week. Once is fine. So you get used to this transition. Okay. All right. So now you're going to turn your fitness into performance. Now it's performance for you. It doesn't mean that you're going to try and win the race. So you get that final block. It's probably the most important. And you heard me say in the beginning, you can turn up fit, but then you're not really feeling like you're executing yourself, and this might be you having done 1 or 2 already, and you're just interested to hear what I've got to say. So thanks for listening this far. All right, so I'm going to do a little recap in a second. But there you've got your 3 blocks all on the whiteboard with my lovely handwriting, and it just gives you an idea that, okay, I know those are the key specific blocks I need to hit with the key specific sessions, not to the detail. How can I make that work in my Monday to Sunday, depending on what's happening in your life with work? Generally, most people Monday to Friday work, and they generally try and train a little bit more on the weekends. Okay. Again, generalizing, some people work shift patterns, and they can get the luxury of doing their long ride in the midweek, which sometimes I do, and keep the weekends a little bit freer. Okay, so here I'm gonna just go on sort of weekly volume guidance, because I know some of you are thinking, how much should I be doing? So I'd say a beginner is obviously your first year doing it. Intermediates, 2 to 3 years of doing some triathlons. Maybe you're still your first half Ironman. And then, of course, experience is chasing some performance here. All right, okay. Now, there's nothing set in stone. I use this as a rough guide for most of my athletes. It also depends on their training age. Okay, 6 to 8 hours. Now that doesn't sound like much, because you might go, oh, but a ride's 3 hours. Remember, it's week in, week out that builds that fitness, that endurance, resilience, and consistency leads to a better race. So 18 weeks of that, you'll have some weeks where you pick up some colds or you got some niggles, and that drops to 3 or 4 big work deadlines. So if you can hit that, you'll absolutely nail a 70.3, you'll finish and it'll be fine. You're not chasing a time. Intermediate, which a lot of you fall into because you're comfortable doing 8 hours already. I sometimes say 8 to 10, but I might actually just push that out to 8 to 12. Okay, some of us are normally around the low end, and 10 is fairly manageable, but it's still training. I mean, I've done a lot of Ironmans averaging 12, but most weeks it's hitting 10. You plan for 15 and you actually hit 10 or 12. So if we look at half Ironmans, you can get a lot out of that, because remember, you're not doing intensity every day. If you're doing 2 high quality sessions a week of intensity, so I mentioned that a little while ago, anything in the severe domain intensity factor, so above your second threshold point, anaerobic threshold, you've got 2. Your easy chat conversational is your first turn point, and then when you can go for 45 minutes to an hour sustaining on a bike or running, that is your second threshold, your otherwise known as anaerobic or your FTP. Anything above that is 3, 4, 5 minutes of exercise duration, going pretty much 95% of your max. So you're only doing 2 of those a week. 1 swim, 1 bike, 1 bike, 1 run. Do you know what I mean? It adds up over your period of, the rest of it is zone 2 work, and then in race prep phase, it's a lot of zone 3 with much less intensity. Okay. Now you've got performance focus, which is anything sort of 12 to 16 hours. All right. You're going to be putting extra duration, your S&C, you're going to be doing more biking work, because that's where you're going to get your gains, and really controlled running. Okay, so if your weakness is the run, you need to protect that. So that means lots of supporting elements to your run. So you might need to do quite a lot of single leg work, a little bit more physio to maintain you and protect the movement patterns. If it's swim, you might need to, in the last block, which we were talking about, increase your frequency, not trying to swim longer, and that generally sorts out a deficiency in the swim element of a triathlon, is increase your frequency. It just takes a lot more time there and back from the pool. But I would start that early because it's technical. So work on your technical stuff early, because then we're just trying to actually build, you can't build technical elements while you're doing a race specific phase, if you follow. That is more open water, getting the wetsuit. So you want to just not try to do everything at once. So you need some clarity. Okay, clarity is everything. What are you trying to improve? And don't try work on all of it at the same time. It's one thing I tell my coach athletes. If we're on a swim block, don't expect to see much happening in the run or the bike. The run training really affects your swim, as in from fatigue, just heavy in the water, and also long hours on saddle. Your swim times will just be sluggish. And it's not because you're just losing fitness, it's just your fatigue carries over, and the water is where you're going to feel it. It's super dense, and most triathletes aren't very, very proficient swimmers. Let's face it, we just are average, or we're quite new to the sport, so we haven't had a history as a youngster. Okay, hopefully that clears up my rough guide of hours. All right, I'm going to do a little summary now at the end. In summary, building your own 70.3 doesn't mean you have to do it alone. First of all, I've helped hundreds of athletes achieve goals that they potentially didn't think they could even do, qualify for world champs. But main thing is just actually arrive at the start line fresh and not fatigued, and ideally not injured. So that's the goal, is get to the start line. That's the most important. Those are the ones who succeed. So personal best, outdo what they thought they could They don't guess, they follow structure, and it's smart training, knowing when to pull back and when you can push, because tiredness is often misleading. A lot of it's just sleep, so you've got to stay consistent. All right, so if this has helped and you want some more guidance, click on the link below that best suits your needs, and let's open up a conversation. Thanks for subscribing. See you at the next one.